it's Jane here for Time for Tea Designs, and it's time for the first step-by-step tutorial of 2022. I hope you've all had a lovely Christmas and New Year. One of the things that I did at the start of the year was to ask on the Time for Tea Friends page if there were any particular tutorials or techniques that you would like to see featured in the blog. And somebody requested creating a scene using masking, so that's what we're going to be doing today. So I'm just going to show you here the products that I'll be using, which are the Smitten Kittens stamp set, the Winter Background stamp set, and I'm also going to be using this heart stencil, and that's going to set the frame for my scene. I'm also going to be using some Distress Oxide inks and doing some ink blending with my Time for Tea blending brushes to create a nice night sky scene. And then, of course, as we're creating a mask scene, I'll be using some masking paper. And my favourite is this Gina K Masking Magic. But really, you can use anything. You can even use post-it notes or post-it tape. One thing that I often find helpful to do when I'm creating a masked scene is to just get a piece of scrap paper like this and actually stamp out the images onto the scrap paper. So I've got the layout there, and then I can either refer back to that when I'm doing my actual scene on the card, or I can even use it as a template, place it over my card, use it to line up the stamped images, pick them up with the MISTI, and then move the guide template out of the way and then stamp straight down onto the cardstock. Today I'm just going to be using as a bit of a visual guide. So what I've done here is I've taken my template and my stencil and I have attached my cardstock to the reverse of the stencil using some Time for Tea washi tape. The stencils from Time for Tea are actually really handy because they have got etched lines in them showing you a US A2 sized card and an A6 sized card. So if you want the cutout shape to go directly in the centre of your card stock, and then you can just line your card up with those etched lines, and it's really, really helpful. Today I've decided to place my heart slightly higher up on my card, so I've just taped that in place where I want it. So the first thing that I've done is stamp down these two kitties onto my scene, and now I'm grabbing a bit of masking paper, and this is just a lesson in saving your scraps. I've got such a tiny piece in there, but it's just the perfect size for this stamp. So if you've used like most of your sheet of masking paper, don't throw away the scraps because honestly they can last you ages. So what I'm doing now is just stamping the kitties down onto the masking paper. Obviously you don't need to get a really good impression here, you just need the image to appear so that you can cut it out. And so I'm just going to wipe down my stamp here with my chamois, and then I am going to fussy cut the masked image. I use my XOXO Express scissors for this. They're not specific fussy cutting scissors, but I actually prefer them to the specific scissors that I bought for fussy cutting. I'm just going to fast forward this so you don't have to sit and watch me do it in real time. But basically I'm cutting right along the black line and not leaving any border at all. So what you want to do is peel the backing off the masking paper and place that down onto your stamped image. The key with creating a scene with masking is to first stamp the image that you want right at the front of your scene, then you mask that off, then you'll stamp behind it the next image, mask that off, and then keep going and get further and further into the background. But yeah, basically start with the image that you want to be right in the foreground. And you'll see that it took a little bit of time to line that masking paper up with the stamped image, because you do want it to be exactly lined up for this technique to work. So what I'm just doing now is placing down my second image, which is the line of trees in the background. And I'm going to stamp that directly over the masked off kitties. The ink that I'm using is Gina K Amalgam Black ink, which is my favourite ink for stamping images that I'm going to Copic colour later on. I'm now stamping the tree image onto masking paper, and I'm going to do exactly the same as I did with the two kitties. I'm going to fussy cut that, and again I'm keep that nice and sped up so that you don't have to watch me do that in real time. You don't need to be particularly accurate cutting at the bottom of the trees here. It's the top line of the trees that's the most important thing, because we are going to be blending above that line. So you might think I'm a bit strange, but I actually really enjoy fussy cutting. It's something that I used to hate, and so was Copic colouring, but somehow I managed to fall in love with both of them. But I did actually just get for my Christmas present a Brother Scan and Cut machine, so that obviously will save me a lot of time with fussy cutting some of my images, so I'll see how I get on with that. So now again I'm just going to line up the masked image with the trees that I've stamped out here, taking care to make sure that it lines up exactly. And I'm just going to gently press that down. You might find that some masking paper is a little bit shiny, and so you might want the ink to dry on it for a second because you don't want to rub any of that onto your cardstock accidentally. What I'm doing here is just adding an extra bit of, a post-it note basically to the bottom of the image, because I am going to start doing some ink blending now, and I just want to make sure that I don't accidentally get any of that below the line of the trees, which I want to keep nice and white. So I am using my favourite blue Distress Oxide colours for night skies. I'm going to start here with Blueprint Sketch at the base of the trees, and then I'm going to blend into that some chipped sapphire. I'm actually tapping the excess off onto a piece of scrap paper, which you don't really need to do with the Time for Tea blender brushes, because they apply such a nice kind of gradual layer of ink, but it's just force of habit. And then at the end there I've added some black soot into the top just to give a bit more depth to that night sky. I'm going to colour the image with Copic markers. I will do my best to put the caps of the pens down as I use them so you can see which markers I've used, but if you can't see it all that well then I will list them in the blog to go with this video. I'm going to speed up the colouring as well, because it took me quite a while to do it in real time. So obviously you don't want to have to sit through all of that. Feel free to fast forward to the end of the colouring if that's not what you are interested in. But I'm using my favourite warm tones here, starting with W5 and then blending into W3, W1 and I think W0 as well. And I'm going to add some stripes on this kitty again, I think in W5 or W3 that I used. And then for the other kitty, I am going to make that a much paler grey, almost white. So I think I'm starting with W3 in the areas where you would expect to see shadow, so right at the base of the kitties and behind the tails and where the two cats overlap. So I'm using my darkest colour first to go into those areas of shadow, and then I am blending out into the lighter colours, gradually getting towards the lightest right in the centre, where you would expect the light to be hitting them. I am using a kind of flicking technique to flick one colour into the next until I'm happy with the blend, and I am starting with my darkest and going to my lightest, which I know not everybody does, but that is my preferred technique for Copic colouring. Right now I'm just grabbing my Copic chart so that I can find a colour that matches the night sky. I'm not sure if you can see it, but where I put the mask on the trees, it's left a very small kind of white gap around the top of the trees before the distress oxides start. So what I've done is found a Copic colour that matches the blueprint sketch as best as possible, and then I am just going over that white gap with that colour, which is a technique which I learnt from a Jennifer Maguire video. And obviously if Jennifer does it, then it can't be wrong, can it? I've done the same for the base of the trees, where obviously it'd be a bit difficult to ink blend there, and so I've coloured it in with that Copic marker as well. Just moving on to the trees, blending from the darkest at the base up to the lightest at the top, where you'd expect the light to hit them. And I'm quite happy with the colour blend on these. I got some new Copic markers just before Christmas. I've been experimenting with some new colour blends, moving away from my kind of tried and tested ones, but I'm happy with this, how it turned out. So just moving on to the base of the trees now to finish off the colouring. And I've decided what to do here is to just finish off the kitties at the bottom where the image didn't stamp fully because it was hidden, it was on top of the stencil. So I'm just finishing that off with a fine liner. Normally I'd use my Micron pen, but I couldn't find it. So I've got a black fine liner here from, I think it's from Sukineko. And that has worked quite well, I think. And then I'm just going to finish off the colouring with a bit of white gel pen. I've got a Jelly Roll number 8 pen here, which I think is the one that they stock in the Time for Tea design store. I've actually found this to be my favourite Jelly Roll pen. I've tried a lot of different white gel pens, and out of all of them I find that this gives the cleanest lines, and it's a nice thickness. So that finishes up the colouring. Now moving on to the sentiment, and I've chosen the I Love Mew sentiment from the Smith and Kittens stamp set, which I'm just stamping here in VersaFine Black, which is my favourite ink for stamping sentiments because it's quite crisp and clear and it dries really quickly. And now I'm just moving back to my white gel pen again to add some stars into the night sky. And I thought that the card would look nice matted onto some black cardstock, which is just the black cardstock from the Time for Tea design store. It really makes that image pop, especially with the black outline and the black sentiment. So that finishes up the card for today. I hope you enjoyed it. And please do share your mass projects on our friends page. Bye for now.